I'm 51 now, and about 13 years ago I had to leave my home in Texas because I got a new job. This job was in a different place, so I couldn't live at home with my wife, Lisa, who's 48, and our two kids anymore. Back then, my kids were about 10 and 8 years old. Now they're grown up VDJ 23 and 21 VJ, and they've moved out to live in Houston. They're doing their own thing. Around the time I moved, something big happened in our country. It's called the Great Recession. It was a time when lots of people lost their jobs and money because there was a big problem in the economy that started with something called the housing bubble. Unfortunately, our family business didn't survive that tough time, and we went bankrupt, which means we suddenly had no money coming in from the business. So that's a bit about what's been happening with me. It's a lot, right? And now, with my wife not wanting to live together and not explaining why, it's really hard to deal with. After my dad passed away, I had to take over running his construction business. This was a huge responsibility to take on. Not only was I dealing with the business, but I also had to take care of my mom, my wife Lisa, and our kids who were still in school. It was overwhelming, especially with the economy being so unstable. As things got tougher, we ended up using all our savings just trying to keep everything afloat. It reached a point where I had to make a tough decision. I started looking for opportunities abroad and tried my luck in various Asian countries. Eventually, I managed to set up a new business in Dubai. That period was incredibly difficult, but my drive to provide a good life for my family pushed me through all the hardships. I had to leave Texas and didn't have a home to call my own for over a year until my new venture started to take shape. After that, I began visiting home every 5 to 6 months. I really wanted to bring my family over to Dubai with me, but Lisa and the kids were hesitant. They didn't want to interrupt their school curriculum by moving, so they chose to stay back in Texas while I worked abroad. It was tough being apart, but I understood their decision to keep their lives as stable as possible. Last year, things started to change a bit in my family. My youngest daughter finished college and even got a job at her older sister's company. Right before she was moving out of the house, I planned a vacation to go home and spend some time with her. During that trip, I brought up the idea to Lisa of moving to Dubai with me now that both our kids had moved out and were starting their careers. However, Lisa turned down the idea because she was worried about leaving my mom alone. I then suggested that Mom could come with us to Dubai too, but neither of them liked the idea of leaving their hometown and moving to a country with such a different culture. I understood their concerns. Middle Eastern culture is really different from what we're used to in the US, so I didn't push the issue further. During my last visit home, I had a serious conversation with Lisa. I told her that I was planning to wrap up my business in Dubai and move back to Texas. It seemed like the best way to keep the family together, even if it meant giving up what I had built in Dubai. I thought sharing my plans to move back to Texas would make Lisa happy, but it turned out quite the opposite. When I told her about my decision, her reaction was far from the excitement I expected. Confused, I asked her directly if she didn't want us to live together anymore. Her response took me by surprise. She said, "No, I'm happy that you worked so hard to establish yourself there. So why would you want to leave everything and come back?" She had a point. Shutting down a business that required so much sacrifice and hard work wasn't an easy decision and might not even be the right one. But after 13 years of living apart from my family and with our kids' education no longer a pressing responsibility, I felt a strong pull to return to my hometown, DJ, the place where I feel most at home. I tried to reassure her, explaining that I would continue to take care of her financially, just as I had been doing all these years. My hope was to find a way to be closer to my family, while maintaining the support they needed. It was a tough conversation filled with emotions and practical concerns, but it was necessary as I considered the next steps in our lives together. I had big plans to start something new in Texas, especially since the country's economy was looking up again. Despite this, Lisa wasn't on board, which really set off alarm bells for me. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the whole situation was turning into a red flag. The next day threw another curveball my way. Out of the blue, my mom showed up and advised me against making what she called a hasty decision to move back. I hadn't mentioned my plans to her or anyone else, so it must have been Lisa who told her. This was a shock. While it was one thing for Lisa to have reservations, having my mom echo those concerns really threw me into doubt about my decision. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being too hasty, so I reluctantly dropped the idea. However, I couldn't shake off the sadness and confusion about why Lisa didn't want to live with me anymore. It made sense on some level, but it was still heartbreaking. The distance between us had grown so much that it was palpable, and it really clouded my mind. After I got back home, I found myself calling and texting her less and less, almost subconsciously. I thought maybe she would notice and bring it up. But it was just one of many attempts to understand what was really going on between us. But she didn't reach out to see if everything was okay. There were days when I wouldn't call her, and she didn't call me either. Days turned into weeks, and our communication became purely transactional. It all pointed to one painful conclusion: VJ, she no longer needed me. Feeling the weight of this, I decided to confront her last month. I asked her directly if she didn't love me anymore. Lisa brushed off my concerns, telling me I was just overthinking things. She explained that she had been busy with the house and taking care of my mom, who has become more fragile with age. I didn't know what to say to that. It's not every day you find your wife bonding so well with her mother-in-law and caring for her as Lisa has. Despite the confusion and the distance between us, I couldn't help but feel grateful for how kind Lisa has been to my mom. This situation left me torn between my feelings of gratitude and my sense of loss over our drifting relationship. My unease grows every day, and I just can't understand why Lisa wouldn't want to be with me. We have our own house, our major responsibilities with the kids are taken care of, and I've assured her that our lifestyle wouldn't suffer if we were together again. It just doesn't add up why she wouldn't want me home. As many might guess, the thought has crossed my mind, VJ, maybe she found someone else. But how do I even begin to find out if that's the truth? Up until now, Lisa hasn't shown any other signs that would make me suspect something like this. She has been an incredible mother, raising our children so well while I was away. It's no small feat what she's done, and she's managed all her roles with such grace. This dilemma leaves me in a tough spot. I want to trust her and believe in the life we've built together, but these doubts and the growing distance are making it hard. What should be my next step in unraveling this confusion and finding out what's really going on? Sometimes I feel bad for suspecting her, but you know how long-distance relationships work. Well, the red flags point that she's found somebody else. It turned out that Lisa had been cheating on me, and my mother knew about it but didn't tell me anything. I'm still trying to understand why this happened to me. In search of some answers, I decided to make a surprise trip back home. I told no one about my plans, not even my mom. As I entered the house, I was really nervous, half expecting to find Lisa with someone else. It's a scenario I've read about all too often: cheating spouse houses and the shock of discovery. But thankfully, nothing like that happened. When I walked in using the spare key, I found Lisa alone in the kitchen. This unexpected situation and finding out about the cheating has left me reeling. I'm now faced with some tough decisions about how to handle this betrayal, while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Thank you for letting me share my story and for your support through this confusing time. When I arrived home unexpectedly carrying a bouquet to make it seem like a pleasant surprise, Lisa was clearly shocked to see me. Her surprise quickly turned to suspicion as she bombarded me with questions about why I was there. I told her I had a light workload that month, so I decided to come home unexpectedly. She managed to smile and tried to appear happy, but it was painfully obvious that her reaction was forced. Over the next few weeks, driven by a mix of hurt and suspicion, I took measures that I'm not proud of to discover the truth. I felt pushed to the edge, needing to know what was going on. I sneaked into her phone, eavesdropped on her conversations, even went as far as planning a GPS tracker on her car and following her around town. These actions, though desperate, provided me with bits and pieces of information that together painted a clear picture of the situation during my absence. This period of snooping and gathering evidence was tough. It's something that I struggled with internally as it went against my usual principles, but the need to know the truth about my relationship and what I was coming back to outweighed my reservations. Now, faced with the facts, I need to decide how to address this situation with Lisa, balancing the hurt and the history we share together. Discovering Lisa's affair was a crushing blow, especially learning that it had been ongoing for 8 years. On the day I arrived home unexpectedly, I noticed immediately how guarded she was about her phone. In the past, she might have had the chance to erase any suspicious messages or calls before I came home, but this time she didn't anticipate my arrival. I tried to look through her phone that day but didn't get the opportunity. When I finally managed to access her phone later, I found nothing. She must have cleaned it out at the first opportunity. However, my doubts persisted, and I decided to place a GPS tracker in her car to find out more about her movements. This led me to follow her one day. Initially, everything seemed normal as she went into a hardware store. However, suspicion grew when I saw the store owner pull down the shutter and close up shop while she was still inside. This situation escalated my concerns into reality, confirming the affair in such a direct and painful way. I was forced to confront not only the betrayal, but also the extent of the secrecy involved. Now I'm left with the difficult task of deciding what to do next given this revelation and the years of deceit that have come to light. Seeing Lisa leave the shop after hours with the store owner hastily reopening the shutters left me reeling. My head spun with the reality of what I was witnessing, and it took everything in me not to storm into the shop right then. I worried that confronting the affair partner directly could backfire, especially if he recognized me and alerted Lisa. Instead, I decided to bide my time and catch them together to avoid any missteps in exposing the truth. I meticulously followed Lisa's movements over the next days. She had a routine of going out in the afternoons, sometimes to see my mom, other times to meet with friends or her own parents. I shadowed her on these outings, driven by a mix of determination and dread, waiting for her to slip up and meet her affair partner again. It was a grueling process, filled with starts and endless waiting. Finally, yesterday, she went to visit my mom. Normally, I would refrain from following her on such visits out of respect and a lingering hope that nothing untoward would occur in such a setting. This cautious approach was partly why it had taken me so long to confirm my suspicions. This affair, now unmistakably real, demanded a confrontation. Yet I was still strategizing the best way to approach such a painful conversation. Witnessing the scene at the hardware store was a staggering moment for me. I had hesitations about following Lisa and my mom yesterday, half hoping they were just out for something ordinary like shopping. Despite my reservations, I followed them, driven by a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. When they stopped at the hardware store, my worst fears materialized. The affair partner emerged and greeted them both warmly right in front of the store. What happened next was beyond anything I could have prepared for. He kissed Lisa while my mom looked on, seemingly unfazed. They all exchanged a few words, and then, to my utter shock, he hugged my mom before she got back into the car and left. Lisa and her affair partner then entered the shop, and he pulled the shutter down once again. Seeing this unfold right in front of my eyes, not just the affair but my mom's apparent acceptance of the situation, was devastating. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. The reality of the betrayal, compounded by the involvement of my own mother, was overwhelming and left me in a state of disbelief and heartbreak. The sense of betrayal was compounded by the involvement of my own mom, leaving me feeling utterly suffocated by the truth. Needing a moment to catch my breath and compose myself, I walked away briefly, trying to process everything that had just unfolded. After gathering some courage, I returned to the hardware store and knocked on the shuttered door. There was no answer at first, so I knocked more vigorously. Finally, the affair partner opened the door, looking startled to see me. I asked him directly where Lisa was, and he was visibly shaken, unable to respond. I didn't wait for him to recover. I pushed past him and entered the shop. The main area was dark, but I could hear faint sounds coming from the storeroom. Driven by a mix of anger and dread, I raced toward the noise. There, I found Lisa in a compromising position, clearly not expecting my arrival. The shock of the situation was overwhelming, confirming my worst fears in the most direct and painful way possible. Confronted with this reality, I was left to deal with the immediate emotional turmoil and the larger implications of these betrayals by those closest to me. In that fleeting moment, chaos erupted into a physical altercation as the affair partner lunged at me, dragging me out of the storeroom while Lisa's screams filled the air. Everything happened so fast that it took me a moment to fully grasp the situation. In self-defense, I managed to land a punch on the affair partner, breaking free from his grasp. Lisa then emerged from the storeroom, hastily covering herself. Fueled by anger and betrayal, I confronted Lisa, grabbing her and demanding to know the extent of the affair. The affair partner moved to intervene, but Lisa stopped him, breaking down into tears. She pleaded with me to take the conversation home, away from the shop. Realizing the potential consequences of the physical scuffle and the need to address this matter more calmly, I decided to leave. Driven by a mix of shock and fury, I went straight to my mom's house. I stormed in, confronting her with the accusation, "You knew it." The betrayal by my wife was one thing, but discovering that my own mother was complicit added a layer of hurt and complexity to the situation. Now, I was faced with not only the breakdown of my marriage, but also the painful realization that my family dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The need for clear, honest discussions was pressing, as I had to deal with the emotional fallout from these revelations. Confronting my mother, I blurted out, "You knew it! You also betrayed me!" Despite my outburst, she wasn't taken aback. Lisa had called her ahead of time. Instead of reacting to my anger, she just cried and took my hand, pleading with me to calm down. Overwhelmed by the situation, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer and broke down. By then, Lisa had arrived. The sight of her only intensified my feelings of betrayal and anger. I demanded the truth from both of them. After much pressing, Lisa finally opened up about her loneliness and struggles during the years I was away. "It's not easy to live alone for 13 years, she said. "You were so busy with your work that you hardly had any time for me. Your calls were limited to a few minutes, mostly just status checks on the children and Mom." "What about me?" I asked her directly how long the affair had been going on. She hesitated, then admitted it might have been 7 or 8 years. Hearing this was devastating. Not only had I been unaware of her emotional needs, but the affair had also been ongoing for such a significant portion of our time apart. This revelation forced me to reflect on the emotional distance that had grown between us and the role I may have played in the deterioration of our relationship. Now, I needed to decide how we could possibly address these deep-seated issues and whether our relationship could be salvaged at all. In the midst of this painful revelation, my frustration and disbelief were palpable. I had dedicated years of my life working hard in a foreign country, all to ensure that my family could live comfortably. Feeling betrayed and bewildered, I confronted Lisa about why she hadn't just divorced me if she felt so disconnected. Her response only deepened my turmoil. Through tears, she told me, "I love you. I never wanted to separate from you. Spending time with the affair partner was only to distress myself and kill my loneliness and nothing else. He doesn't mean anything in my life." I was stunned. The idea that her long-term affair meant nothing was hard to digest. It seemed implausible that such a significant betrayal could be dismissed as merely a way to alleviate loneliness. I turned to my mom, searching for some understanding of why she would condone or even support this betrayal. Her response was equally heartbreaking. She sobbed and said, "I know you hate me, but think of my perspective. You left me alone here." Both Lisa and my mom expressed feelings of abandonment, which forced me to reflect on the unintended consequences of my decisions and absence. Their words suggested a profound disconnect between my intentions and how they experienced my absence. This complex web of emotions, loneliness, and betrayal left me grappling with the harsh realities of our relationships. Now it was crucial to figure out if there was a path forward that could address the hurt and begin to mend the fractured bonds within my family. In that moment of overwhelming betrayal and pain, hearing my mother's and Lisa's justifications, that Lisa was fulfilling her needs and my mom was feeling supported by her, didn't ease the sting of betrayal. As I stood up to leave, both tried to stop me, pleading for me to stay and talk it through. But I needed space. I was clear in my message, especially to Lisa, telling her not to follow me home as I needed time alone to think. Driving back, I was engulfed by a mixture of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. The thought that kept circling in my mind was whether any part of this affair was my fault. Was my dedication to providing for my family from abroad a mistake? Had my absence justified their actions in some way? It's common in situations like these to question your role and whether different choices might have led to a different outcome. However, while it's important to reflect on how your actions might have impacted your relationships, it's also crucial to remember that everyone is responsible for their own actions. An affair is a decision, not an inevitable consequence of circumstance. Feeling sick with all these thoughts is a normal response to such a deep betrayal. It might be helpful to seek support, whether through friends, family, or a professional, as you navigate these complex emotions. Taking time to process your feelings and deciding on your next steps is important. Reaching a place of understanding about what you want for your future and how to approach your relationships moving forward will take time and self-reflection.